Hey guys, this is Dr. Michelle Markham, and I'm here today with Molly Muse, and we're going to do a really fun talk today about being in the flow and being authentic, and just sometimes maybe, not having to live in these, like, all these boundaries of, like, what's expected of us. We all, I think, have this programming that we've been under, like, from the time we were little, that, you're supposed to go to school for 13 years, like kindergarten through 12th grade. And then you're supposed to graduate. And then either you're supposed to go to vocational school or you're supposed to go to college, and you're supposed to get a degree or certified in something. And then you're supposed to, do, things by the book in life. And there's certain expectations and milestones you're supposed to meet. And that's really not true. But a lot of us believe that. We don't have to have that reality if we don't want to. Now, if you want to, you certainly can. But it's not mandatory, guys. That's a pretty dang cool thing. So that's something that I've only been kind of aware of maybe for the last couple of years, actually. And then, of course, I attracted Molly into my life, and she attracted me, and we met each other, and she does all this really amazing stuff. So I said she's probably like the number one person that I follow. Pretty much every move she makes online. And I love everything that her and her husband Bodhi do, because it's just, I don't know, it's like I just feel like glued to it. It's really cool. I'm going to read her little bio here, and then I'm going to kind of ask her a couple questions. So Molly is a seasoned veteran of change, and she's crafted an artistic method to help navigate the waves and seasons of existence. As a military brat, every couple of years she moved into a new town, a new school, new friends, and even a new country. Spending her formative teen years in Japan before being dropped into rural Ohio the summer before her senior year, she learned to adapt and learn from every changing moment. One of the lessons that she adopted was a fearless curiosity to follow her heart. But with a restless spirit, she couldn't shake or get far enough from the feeling that something was missing in her life. From all her searching and exploration, she became a Jill of all trades and a master of none. All of these experiences led her to experience and narrow down exactly who she is, a muse. Once she was conscious of her intuition and saw her purpose, she was given the insight of the quantum memoir process, and has been working its magic for the last year to document its metaphysical, mental, and physical healing benefits. And you guys are going to love this. It's really cool. I don't even, she's going to describe it to you. I can't even put it into words. Every time I see one and watch it unfold, I'm always just like, what's next? What's next? What's the next piece? And it's always like, well, of course that's the next piece. It makes so much sense. Or it's almost like watching, a really cool movie with like plot twists. Oh. And you're like going like, oh, wow. Whoever thought of that was a genius. That person's really creative. And it's just, but you're doing it with real life stuff. And it's so cool. It's just like, I can't put it into words. Her purpose is to inspire you to be creative, think outside the box, and find your authenticity. By following her social media accounts, you can get daily doses of ideas to ponder, or just use her website and YouTube tutorials to make your own quantum memoir and learn intention-setting practices to manifest the life you are striving for. So that's another thing about Molly. She's just very into manifesting, yes, being authentic. I mean, that's probably why we got all excited to meet each other, because, I am so big into manifesting and being authentic. It's like one of my favorite things all day long to ever talk about. So, Molly, dear, would you share a little bit about the last couple years of your out-of-the-box journey and what's happened as far as, moving into the apartment and then deciding, you and Bodhi, that you wanted to get the tiny house, and then your process of deciding that you wanted to get the homeschooler, which you're sitting in right now?
Yes, I'm sitting in now, the bus. For those of you that don't know what an homeschooler is, it's the name of our school bus. We have like a mid-sized, in between a big bus and a short bus. And we're still converting it, but we've been living in it for about 2 months now. Even completely, it's not finished, but we're still living in it. So I guess the journey is, it's forever.
So you're not a carpenter, right? You're not a carpenter.
No. These nice straight cuts I got actually Lowe's to do for me. You just go ahead and measure it. You tell them what you want and they do it for you. So you have to be resourceful if you don't know how to actually do it right. Yeah, I think my whole life has kind of been a turmoil of destruction and recreation. So once I got married to Bodhi, we, we kind of thought like, this is it. We're settling down. We're adults and this is going to be the rest of our life. We got a really nice apartment, a huge apartment, furnished it, was living in it for a few months. And then he came across this show called Tiny House Nation. And the first episode we watched, we were hooked. He looked at me and he's like, you want to do it? On the other side of the couch. And I'm like, absolutely. So within 6 months, we started planning. Within 6 months, we got rid of our apartment, all of our stuff, and we built a tiny house. No experience. We didn't even have the money. We just knew that it would all play out and, turn out. So we did it and we lived off grid for a year and a half. And through that experience of trying something new, we realized, well, that's not exactly for us, but this kind of nomadic, smaller footprint seems to be. So we want to try to continue it. And that's when we decided to go ahead and go the school bus route. We're about a month out for setting out for the summer while he's out for the summer to just travel around wherever life takes us. We have no exact, plan or destination other than just following what feels right. And that's pretty much been the theme of my life.
So one thing I noticed, like when you were in the transition, because when I first met you, I had no idea, and I don't think you had any idea that you were going to get out of the tiny house and go to a bus. When you left the tiny house and went to the campground, I never heard you say, oh, we failed. Oh my gosh, we made the wrong choice. We did the wrong thing. You've always seemed to look at it as like, okay, well, we had this process to get to this step, and this step led us to the next one. This step, is that not how you would describe it? Well, so what is that like to not feel like, oh my gosh, because that's what I believe in. I believe that there's no wrong choices. Right. Even if we make really major life choices, like getting rid of a lot of our possessions and moving into a tiny house, or I moved to Colorado for a while away from all my family, or breaking up with someone, or being in a relationship that when you look back on it, you kind of think, ew, that was a crazy thing. But it's like, I always look at that stuff as that's part of what got me from there to here. Yeah. I don't ever think like, oh my God, I so screwed up on that one. And I love it because you've made some really drastic changes and met with judgment from family, friends, whatever, different people, random people on the internet saying like, oh, you can't do that. And so like you always, I'm sure like there's human feelings that come in, right? Like who wouldn't have that? But you always like come back to it with, isn't that interesting? What does this all mean? Like, how am I going to process this? What is it trying to tell me? And where do I go from here? You don't let it just like slam you up against the wall and, push you down into like a mud puddle or something and leave you there. You just like get back up and go, that's my next.
It surely does knock me down sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe 24, 48 hours, like I'm in tears, pulling my hair out. What the hell happened? But
like the breakdown before the breakthrough.
I think that I failed often when I was younger, and especially in my 20s. I started businesses. I was married, before. I failed as far as what society would consider it. I failed often enough to realize and restart from that failure was only a point of view. It was only a word that people attached to something, which was trying something different and new. So when we decided that the tiny house wasn't for us, we were struggling, the first winter off grid with having heat, just staying warm, basic necessity of life, just staying warm in the winter. We knew that the second winter was coming and we weren't prepared enough, that we needed to make a move. And we had already seeded the summer before thinking about getting a tiny bus, a short bus, because of all of the judgment that we felt people had towards us, like our community, about living in a tiny house. Like, oh, you're trying to escape taxes. Oh, you're trying to beat the man. Like all of these things, like you're going to bring my property value down. Like all of these hateful things, we were in the newspaper, and the light that they shed it on us was like, no, that's not what we're trying to do at all. We're trying to experience something different. So we were fearful that our home was going to be taken away from us, that we would come home one day and there would be tape, on the door saying you can't inhabit this. So we had considered getting a short bus, last summer. We even looked at one. We had one picked out, but our mechanic said, no, don't do it. So the seed had been planted that maybe we should have done the bus, but it still wasn't the right timing. We still worked through trying to stay in the tiny house, commit to the thing that we had done, put more resources into it. And then, last winter it was like, no, it's not working. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So pulled the plug. In 9 days, we sold the tiny house in 9 days.
See, and that was impressive because when I saw you guys put that up for sale and you sold it and your car and you sold all that stuff like that, it was like, wow, that's manifesting right there. That means you're so in alignment with what you're doing, because if things just fall down like dominoes, you've got to be in alignment. So that was really cool.
Also that we didn't have an attachment to the value of our house, of the dollars and the time and the heart that we had put into building it. We didn't have an attachment that we have to get this expectation out of it, like a high expectation. What was valuable to us was selling it quick, getting the cash so that we could go on to the next thing. So, by most standards, people would say, oh, you took a loss on it. But to us, we got every penny out of it that we put into it, through the experience of living in it and doing it and collaborating and working together and figuring it out. There was no loss to us whatsoever. There's just change.
when you were building that, and then when you kind of realized like, okay, it's too cold to be in here during the winter vortex, it just so happened to happen, and all of that stuff. And I know the cold was like a big thing for you, but what was the thing that you really, I don't know, like that you're going to take to the end of your life, like the lesson or like the nugget or the pearl or whatever that you were like, wow, that's what I really learned about myself or my relationship with Bodhi or my ability to learn or my ability to let go and move on? What was it for you guys that you really learned?
Well, what immediately came up for me when you were saying that was my husband, Bodhi. He is not a mechanical person. He is not a construction type person. He's, his family had always referred to him as like the Jewish prince. Like he wasn't into dirty, these sorts of things. He's a sports guy. So during that winter when we were struggling, we were living off of a gas generator and we had to get a second one because one would freeze. And so we were like doing this thing, and he would be out there for an hour trying to get it to start. Like we have no heat and he's out there trying to get it to start. It's frozen. It's not working right. He's not mechanical. He doesn't know how to do it. So the perseverance that I saw in him, it completely changed my point of view of like, I'm going to get emotional, what he was capable of for us, where I didn't think, before that, I didn't see that demonstrated, in his life prior to us meeting and prior to us doing that. So you can see I'm verklempt.
So
it really
is that not like it's priceless?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like I can see that. I'm
feeling emotional. There's, I think, a lot of good points to be made here. And one of them is that I will notice that people will often say, well, I could never do that because it won't be possible for me because we can't afford it, or we're on a fixed income, or this thing or that thing. Okay, well, I know Bodhi is a teacher and he's a coach, and you basically work for yourself. So are you not also on a fixed income? Because there's not like, there's like this pot of gold sitting on a tree outside somewhere that you're like, well, but you made it happen anyway.
Yeah.
You figured out a way. And that's the
we did that with
cool
a tiny
thing.
House. I didn't have an income anymore. So it's been a couple years since I closed my business. So I haven't been employed for a few years. So, and I still don't have a business. Like Quantum Memoir is not my business. It's just this thing that I do with my time. And I'm actually trying to experiment with the idea that to not get a job, not to get something where I do something for somebody where they pay me, that I just be me, I help people, and people will help us back. So I'm kind of playing around with this reciprocity idea. And I think what happens is that you got to, if you're going to be like that, you have to let go of that linear idea that you were talking about. Like you go to high school, you go to college, you meet somebody, you get married, you buy a house. Like I never did that. Like I had a baby before I even got married. I didn't marry the person that I had a baby with. Like literally everything that I've ever done is not in the linear idea of what society says is normal. And I think that affords me the opportunity to say, okay, I don't have, like, our house is not done. You know, if I had tons of money, maybe I would pay someone to do it and it would be done. But because I am free from the expectation of it being done in a linear way, I can go ahead and live in it without running water. We don't have a shower or sink. You know, we have to use outside resources for that. So it still can be done. You just have to do it in a more forgiving and lenient, I guess that's the flow. Just
Yeah.
What's there? What can you work with? What resources are in front of you?
Yeah. I love that, because I think I was raised by a mother who always had tons of expectations and outside expectations of what do other people think. And I notice that a lot of times people, you know, they live their lives that way. And I really had to work hard to get out of that rut, because it was always like, well, if I don't have, it's like keeping up with the Joneses, basically. Like, it's really not even your dream and your life anymore. It's more like, what do my neighbors think? What does my family think? What does grandma so-and-so, or, you know, my husband's sister, whoever, and are they going to think that I'm good enough if I don't meet these milestones or things? And hopefully we're not too frozen here, but you just kind of stuck for a second. But I love that, because it seems like I mean, I'm not saying that you never feel judged or anything, but you know, if you do, like, okay, what's that all about? What do I need to let go of? And then you get over it in a reasonable amount of time. You might, you know, have a shitty day, but then it's done and you just walk away. You shake it off and say, I give 0 fucks, and you let it go. And that's like the coolest way. I mean, that's like, okay, is that not what true happiness is really all about? To be able to explore, to learn, to grow. People pay for what you're doing. If you were to pay a coach to give you the experiences and the life learning or whatever of all of this, you'd be probably paying hundreds of $1,000s to multiple coaches to give you these learning experiences. But you're just like saying, I'm going to figure out, what does reciprocity mean? I'm going to figure out, what does like living with something like an open-ended plan of, well, I'm going to let it unfold before me. You know, those of us who are ready for those kinds of lessons, those spiritual lessons that really make us grow, usually we pay a shitload of money to a coach to, like, you know, give us all these exercises, you know, and they can be very painful sometimes. Like, here, little birdie, go fly, you know, and we're like, I don't know, I like it here. But it's so cool to see a person just taking that on for themselves. And like, it's almost like that, you know, that self-perpetuated growth process that's not even from, like, you know, so like the quantum memoir, that wasn't something like where you went and studied at some, I don't know, like a school or a course or whatever to figure out how to do that. You just like let it come to you. You stayed open to whatever was going to come, and you were willing to explore all the little things that came up. And you were willing, and I love it, like you talk about this a lot, about how somebody might have an oppositional idea from yours.
Yeah.
But you're willing to stay open to it and hear what it is, to see like, well, what am I supposed to learn from that? Or what piece can I take from it, and let go of the right and wrong, and just know like, okay, well, that's just their thing. And there's so many people, and I'm one of them who's really working my way out of that. But there's so many people who struggle with that belief. There's so much black and white in this world.
Yeah, like I find
but those
like,
gray areas are so
stating my opinions, and then I'm looking back the next day, I'm like, damn, I was pretty opinionated with that. Like there was no room for allowance to move or anything like that. And then I'm like, okay, so maybe I need to soften a little bit. Maybe I need to be a little bit more open-minded. And I think that I get blindsided sometimes by other people's strong opinions. And I do the same thing. I stop and I'm like, ouch, that hurt. And then I try to observe it from multiple points of view. It's not just my point of view and their point of view, but like perhaps other point of views as well. And that kind of
exactly.
It just helps keep everything in a motion so that you're not just like too stagnant.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. I like that. Okay, so I want you to maybe share a little bit about like the homeschooler. You're studying in it right now. You kind of alluded earlier to homeschooler being the bus, but so you want to talk a little bit about like what this signifies for this plan that you have which with, you know, space to like it not be exactly what you thought it was, but where's it going to go? What's going to happen? And like what, maybe a little bit of like, you know, even what you're doing with it, like where's the process you're in right now, like as in how much of it is done and how much of the actual bus itself. I see that your ceiling is like not quite finished, but you said you don't quite have all your water. So just if you want to just give a little rundown of like, you guys can watch all the videos of the process of them doing this, and it's really cool. I recommend it. And I'll give you all the links to all of her different things that she's got out there that you can see her stuff. But like the process of you paid the guy to tear out the stuff, and then you went and you built a lot of it, and Bodhi helped you do some things, but he was still working. Yeah. So a lot of it fell upon you, the woman in overalls. And then, you know, just talk a little bit about some things that happened along the way, and then what's going to happen later. What's the plan for the bus? Okay.
So I suppose the broad umbrella is that my husband's a teacher, and I'm a muse, a leader, numerology. I'm a number one. So we have this idea that we don't really like public school. You know, he's a high school teacher. He's a coach. He makes really big impact with his students in a non-traditional kind of teaching way. That's where, you know, those lessons really are coming from. So we were thinking that we're going to have, well, even when we had the tiny house, we were going to buy land. And so we were looking for land when we had the tiny house, but, you know, expenses, things like that, it just wasn't going to work out. So our goal now is that in 5 to 10 years, we'll buy a piece of property. And until then, the homeschooler is this idea, the seed of some sort of new education, a new way of people learning, and not just like public school, like kindergarten through 12th grade, but like preschool, you know, like little kids up to, you know, 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds, whatever. And that we all can kind of just come together and teach each other trades and skills and consciousness, and really just kind of create a community around it. So what we'll do with the homeschooler is we'll start building that following, that community, but we'll also go out and explore the United States and find exactly where do we want to live. Because with the tiny house, it was too big to really, you know, be affordable to move it around. So now we have the wheels, you know, the key to just turn and drive and go. So we could go anywhere and find what location, what state, you know, what kind of environment, woods, lake, you know, creek, what is it going to be that's going to be our space. So the homeschooler is the seed for whatever this future life is that we're, you know, building for ourselves. And we kind of take the process that we don't have a plan. Like we stopped planning, because every time we plan something, we get let down. Our expectations don't get met. They didn't necessarily exceed our expectations. They were like under our expectations. So what we do now is we just do outlines. So we have outlines and ideas of what we want to do. And then we let all of the moment to moment things that transpire lead us towards, you know, the proper direction instead of deciding for ourselves.
I love it.
What seems to be working.
I love it because we don't, obviously, our minds are only so big as human beings, or at least where we're at in our own consciousness right now. And how could we ever, I mean, just think about it, how in conversations with people, you learn so much, you get opened up to more ideas. How can we really expect ourselves to know the whole future of the way this plan is going to lay out if we put ourselves in that little tiny, like, oh, I drew out like this plan for my whole business model or whatever, like my whole, I'm going to be, that's why I love teaching beta courses, because I know what I want to teach and I start teaching. And then with the feedback of the students, because I don't know who's going to show up for my classes. I don't know what kind of, they ask amazing questions, or something will come up, or they'll hit a brick wall with something, or they'll get a great idea that I never thought of. Yeah. And then the class can keep creating itself through the process with them. It's like this amazing co-creation. And then at the end, we have this thing that I would never, and I'm not trying to down my own brilliance or anything, but alone by myself, I never would have come up with all that. Yes. So you're doing the same thing, except for with your whole life. And that's like amazing. And so it's cool. Yes. Yeah. So I love that so much. And I didn't know, like, until we were talking today, I mean, I kind of knew a little bit about the, you know, what was going down the road, but it never really snapped into my mind. Like, oh my gosh, this is like really big. Like this bus, it it means something. And so I was thinking too, like, had you moved out of the apartment into the bus, I don't know, like, would you have really been ready for it? And did you really need a tiny house in between?
That is to me, I think that's a very interesting concept, because it really gives an idea of like where our mindset was before to where it is now. When we saw the tiny house nation, when we were researching it on YouTube, we saw schoolies. We saw the idea that people were living in school buses. And so we asked ourselves at that time, is that something we should do? Is that a possibility? And there was no way. It was too far outside of the reach of being a house and a home. So our mindset was, and especially with the friends and family and things that we were surrounded by, that would like, you're trash. You're like, we just kind of looked down on it. Like that's not how people live. That's not appropriate. That's not okay for us. We're above that. And so we didn't have the awareness and the consciousness that that's not true at all. That is not, those are just ideas that in society that make that disparage, between rich and poor and success and not success. And these are not actual lines. These are just ones that we create in our mind. But we couldn't do it. Like we decided, no, we got to do the tiny house. That's far more like responsible and grown up, and whatever words we could have used, we had to do the tiny house route. But we had to do it that way so that we could come to the conclusion that there is no difference between that and this. And there's really not a whole lot of difference between this and even living in an apartment. And that we are more mobile and free.
Yeah.
Our lives are still, our day-to-day lives are still the same, even though we don't have water. Like I don't know. Like I guess you don't know what you could do without until you do without it. We had no idea of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually here's another conversation I was having with someone today. So the air conditioning went out on my van last summer, and I didn't want to pay to get it fixed. Or I was afraid, I think it was more than anything, I was afraid of going to a mechanic and getting screwed over. I was thinking about how when I was a kid, we didn't have air conditioning in my house when I was growing up. Yeah. We had a box fan in the window, and nobody was dying. And it was hot, it was just as hot as it's only like 81 out today. And when I was a kid, nobody had air conditioning in their car either. My first vehicle that I ever had, all the way till I was in my early 20s, because I had that car for like 7 years, that car didn't have air conditioner. It didn't have automatic windows. It had the crank. Like a ton of stuff. And now, like when I bought my van 5 years ago, I remembered thinking, because it had heated seats and a heated steering wheel. Now the heated seat I could get with and think like, ooh, that would be really nice. Yeah. But now I'm going to be spoiled and I won't ever want to ride in another car, but okay, I'll just get it anyway. But I thought a heated steering wheel, that is so silly. Like, who is such a baby that they have to have a heated steering wheel? I'm so bad now that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't live without a heated steering wheel. So if I ever have to drive another vehicle in the winter, I'm like touching it with my pinkies, like, oh, it's so cold, I can't stand it. And it's funny how we get used to stuff. These conventions, like we get them in our heads, like, oh my God, if I didn't have running water, I can almost hear people watching this thinking, how does she live without running water? Like, how does she stink? How can she wash her dishes? Is there whatever. You do have access to water. It's not like you don't have access to any water. Where you're at right now, you're at a campground.
Even like when we were off grid in the tiny house, we didn't have, we have a faucet outside now that I can go out there and wash my dishes. But when we were a year and a half off grid in the tiny house, we had to bring water, like the big 5-gallon things of water in to do the dishes. So it was a trade-off, There were things that were great because we were in nature and it was quiet and we didn't have neighbors, but yeah, we had to bring water and we had to go to the gym to shower, So there were inconveniences, but that was nothing to where it ruined our life. Like, it didn't bring down the quality of our life, except for when we didn't have heat. That definitely was hard.
Right. But you didn't also have a lot of if we want to be honest with it, what would be inconveniences of the way a lot of regular people live? Like, all the maintenance and the mowing of the lawn and the, you know, like, oh, we got to go up and patch the roof and the water heater went out and this thing. I mean, not that that can't happen in a tiny house, and not that, you know, you don't have to do repairs on your bus or whatever like that. But I'm just saying, when you're living in a more simple way, when you're living in a more minimalistic way, there's less cleaning, there's less maintenance, there's less like all the chaos and go, and just like the pressure of maintaining all of that. And so you do have time to go get a 5-gallon pail of water. Like, you know, there is, so sometimes it's like, it's really not as bad as it seems. A lot of very rustic areas and cabins that don't have water, you know, like the one that my grandparents had when I was growing up, it had a hand pump, and we had to heat water on the stove or take a bath in the river or in the lake. And that's what everybody did. And they finally put in like an outbuilding, I think about 10 years ago, for some people that wanted to take a real shower, because sometimes people go up there snowmobiling and in the wintertime, like a real shower. But when we go up there, I rough it like for real, because I want that experience. And it reminds me of being a kid too. So it's just funny, like how we create all these beliefs. And this is like, so this is your life, but like, how do we create these same beliefs like in our own life? Like,
society, like, it's our Western society, because, you know, I lived in Japan for 4 years when my dad was in the service. So I got to spend 4 years over there from 8th grade to 11th grade. And what that afforded me was to see that the American way, just call it the American way, the Western civilization, is not the only way. You know, I stay with Japanese families that they have a hole, you know, like a very primitive sort of hole in the floor, and that's their toilet. You know, their bath, you know, you bathe outside of the bath, and the bath water is for a whole family.
Wow.
First, you know, guest, children, mother. So like, you learn that what we think is normal and is what like a average life is only an average life in the perception of what your mind is. Because if you come from a lower, you know, economic area or a high economic area, a different country, those normal things are completely different than what a lot of us think is normal. So it's just the point, like everything just really comes back to the point of view and the perception that you carry based on the experiences that you have. And until you start experiencing something different, then you have nothing to compare your normal to.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting too when you're talking about other countries. I remember having friends that went to Europe just a few years ago, and they were talking about how over there, you know, to pay for a bottle of water, it's really expensive. And part of the reason people, well, not only is it not available, but people also don't, and I think this was like Spain, mainly where they were at, and they were talking about how to use the bathroom, you have to pay.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that would be weird for us to go over there if we'd never experienced it. But like, why do we feel that it's so safe for us to keep like this little box around us that this is the way is good and this other way is weird, or this other way is wrong or bad or like, you know, unsanitary or something? Because then we're restricting ourselves from like getting a learning experience or just being in the flow, like, because anything could change at any time. You know, and I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to have World War III anytime. But you know what? Seriously, anything could happen. What happens if, you know, all the electronica goes down and we don't have things like this where we can get on here and like the banking systems all fall apart and fail, or anything happens, the government, there could be some kind of chaos. There could be another civil war. Anything could happen. Everything's so uncertain all the time. But that doesn't mean we're not safe and okay. But it only means we're not safe and okay if we're like that rigid that we feel like if we lose some of these like comforts or whatever we want to call them, the ways we've learned to live, if we lose that stuff, then we're attached to it. And then that's where we're not safe anymore because we don't know how to function outside of that. But like you guys have like really lived it, like where you're like, okay, hey, we're not even going to feel forced into that. We're just going to like see what would it be like if we did this? Like we've got this like dream, this 5-year plan or 10-year plan or whatever it takes. And we're flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be like one of the most freeing things. You think about how pervasive anxiety and depression is in this country. And I think a lot of it there's a lot of things that go into it. There's pesticides and there's, you know, toxins and everything. But a lot of it's just like all that pressure that we have that's really self-imposed, honestly.
It's a rut. You know, like the human behavior is the path of least resistance. So if we talk about flow, you know, we're habitually going to do the easiest thing, turn on the faucet, you know. We're going to always follow what we've already done before because we've already had like a trained behavior that's easy and quick and I know it. So
yes,
to step away from that, like that is like the next thing in human evolution, is to realize that I don't have, like, I'm smart enough to and wise enough to not just do what I've always done. Like, okay, I'm going to question this. Maybe it was right. Maybe I should do it that way, but I'm at least going to try a different way and see if something else comes forward or something else comes from that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
You always inspire me just to think about, like, so whenever something doesn't like show up the way I expected it to, I just think like, well, you know, what else is there out there? There's probably another, go over it, go under it, go around the side. Who can help? Who can I ask? Who can I learn from? What kind of like playful or fun can I bring into it? Why does it have to be bad? It's like when, you know, people, like when the power goes out or the internet goes down or something, and then people don't know what to do because their phone died and their computer won't turn on. So like their whole life is freaking ruined for them until the power comes back, you know, like, but what's your sidestep plan? What else is there, you know, if that doesn't work? Because like you're living proof that there is, you know, stuff. There is other things.
Always another way, another choice, a different direction. Like we are not, like, it's that linear thing. Like we're not just in life and we're always going to be going that way. Well, you can do it that way if you want, but you know, we have the ability to turn all sorts of different ways, including inside, that will give you new opportunities. And that's what, I guess, my childhood upbringing, you know, the businesses that I've tried, the companies that I've worked for, I've put all these little pieces together, and I've now allowed myself the freedom to go ahead and follow what feels right instead of what is expected of me.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Or like, yeah. So what is, you know, what do we expect of ourselves sometimes? Because we get we can get rigid in our ideas of what we think success, failure, being right, being wrong, and all that stuff is. If we can just like let go of all of that, because we're in the matrix, for God's sakes. I mean, this is a dream, and we are creating it and we are making it up. So like, if you're making up a bunch of shit you hate, you get to stop that anytime you want. And I mean, there was just, I think maybe even a year ago, I still didn't have this belief. I didn't really know that what I just said was the absolute truth. I just had like a spiritual awakening in the Tennessee woods. You know, I was like, oh my God, like I actually am creating all this. Holy crap. It's really true. But, you know, before that I was working towards it, but, there are so many people, and I think what it is we really feel we're safe in everything that we know, like so far, like everything we believe is truth so far. If we leave that truth, even a toe outside of it or a hair outside of it, like, oh my gosh, we're in the unknown, we're in the unsafe. But actually in the unknown, I think you're freer than anywhere else you can be practically, because there is no expectation in that place. Raw, pure possibility in the unknown, and there's no expectation. There's really no failure, because you don't even know it's going to be coming your way. It's like, it's totally like, everybody talks about mindfulness. Mm-hmm. And I don't think most people even get what it even is. That's another thing that was a created convention by somebody who decided this is what mindfulness has to be. It has to look like this. And your cell phone has nothing to do with it. And I think that's bullshit. It just blows my mind. It's like, you know what? I'm sure the old timers said that about TV. I'm sure the people before that said that about radio. I'm sure the people before that said that about some other newfangled idea. When that came about, you know, like if you went back in history, I think there's always been people who are used to a certain way that really shunned the new way that was coming up. Yeah. And that's like, it's sad that we do that in a way, but that's also part of the learning process. I mean, there's really no right or wrong to do anything, but we can be a whole lot happier if we want to be by letting go of all of that and just being open. You know, it just,
forgiveness is what, like, if you're being mindful and you catch yourself like, oh, I'm only going on Instagram to get attention. then you're being mindful of that,
Yes.
and you're learning something from it. Or maybe you're going on Instagram to post a business thing, and it's part of your mission, your purpose, or whatever, and that's mindfulness too. So it's really just like being aware, and that when you are not being, you know, mindful, that you forgive yourself and you come back to something else. Like to me, like there is one,
we all have
thing is changing in every moment. It's always an opportunity to be better, to do better, to do something different, create something new.
Absolutely. We get to decide, like, so if you made one choice, the very next split second, you can choose something different. You're never stuck with the same choice, like forever. You get to change it a million times if you want to. I mean, it doesn't, the energy doesn't make you stay.
I was a huge self-help junkie. Like I had hundreds of self-help books, and there's one that has always stuck with me, and it's called The Dip by Seth Godin. And it talks about quitting. And I think that, like, I was brought up, you can't quit. And I think probably a lot of people are brought up that you can't quit something. You have to just keep pushing and keep persevering.
Yep.
And that book and it's a short book, like it's a really tiny book, or you can do the audio of it. And it really got me to recognize that, what exactly am I quitting? You know, am I quitting, or what is quitting, I should say? Is it taking your resources and putting them towards something better because that no longer serves you? Or is it giving up because you're afraid to succeed? And it's like making that decision between the two. And I think that really will help with the mindfulness, the moving forward, the flow, is to know when to quit and when to keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because sometimes it's time. Like if you would have kept trying to stay in the tiny house, you wouldn't have built the bus, and then you wouldn't have had this, you know, ability to travel around and find the perfect place for the school.
Yeah.
Otherwise you would have had to, you know, maybe try to travel and then haul the house there and then sit around there for a while and then move the house again. It wouldn't have been as mobile. So you just learn that along the way. And that was like the beauty in it. I don't know. I always think it's good. Like, cause there's always the yin and yang, or the white and the black or whatever. But you know how, like, so sometimes there's escapism, and sometimes, you know, sometimes it just depends on if it is for you. So like we can escape into anything. We can escape into spending money, into being frugal, to being religious, to being like sexual addiction, to sports. We can be like workoutaholics. We can be lazy people on the couch. You know, you could like over diet yourself and be so obsessed with like, what are you putting in your body? What supplements? And, so it could be like technically healthy, and people will argue, they'll be like, oh, well, you know, taking a bunch of vitamins is way better than a heroin addiction. But like, what does it do to your soul? And that's the point to me. It's like, okay, just be honest with yourself and, you know, be willing to like let go of whatever. And like you said, the quitting, when you realize like that thing no longer serves you. So when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I wasn't raised as one. They came and knocked on my door, and I was kind of like, yeah, I don't think so. And then I was thinking like, okay, well, I was praying to God and asking for like some, you know, like direction. And I was like, that's really not what I was meaning, but okay, maybe. And then I took it on. And I mean, I dove into it so deep. I studied the Bible. I was baptized. I stopped celebrating my children's birthdays. I didn't celebrate Christmas, my own birthday. Like I totally changed so much about me. Then I started to become very judgmental of other people and, you know, all this other stuff. I would never, but when I decided that the time was done, I did have that question in my mind. All that I've invested in this, all that I've stood for against my family, who thought I was batshit crazy and blamed me for ruining their life because, well, you're taking the joy of Christmas away from your children, and you're taking my joy as a grandmother in being able to make Christmas cookies with the kids, or, you know, being able to do this and this because you don't participate in that. So this is bullshit. It's not fair. And you probably got that with the tiny house and, you know, with the bus. Like, how could you do this to us? Like, it really is, you're doing, like, no, you're just enjoying your freaking life.
That's actually a really good topic, is that, you know, like, the hell with people judging you, strangers judging you on social media, but when you have your friends that are like, I don't really like who you're becoming, or
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I can talk to you. I don't know if you can come over anymore.
then that really puts you in a position where you have to trust yourself and put yourself, that's where like that's when you could really learn what self-love is that, wait a second, if this is what I want and they're telling me that that's bad and that's not okay, who do I listen to? Are you really going to have somebody else tell you what's appropriate for you? Like, we're all born individuals so that we can experience this exact template fingerprint of this thing that's been put together. Like, don't do it because somebody else says it. Do what feels right for you. And of course, you know, like if you're thinking that you're going to go out and commit crimes, that's not what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. But your lifestyle, like, so people who don't want to vaccinate their kids, or people who want to join a certain religion or whatever, we're obviously not talking about like horrible crimes and, you know, crazy shit, but yeah, stuff that's just not, you know, what your family feels is the way they would like to do things. And so then you really realize, like, what is unconditional love at that point? And not to beat up on our families or anything like that, but it can hurt a little bit, but then we have to come back around to, you know, we have to forgive ourselves. We get to forgive them and be like, okay, they just don't understand. They're just scared. And they're also losing the person that they were attached to, that behaved and showed up in a certain way, and they feel like something's being taken away from them. So that's just their way. They're not, they just want they want their Cheryl back, basically, or they want their Michelle back. You know, it's like, well, who the hell is Molly? Like, what the fuck is that? You know? So I get
actually, I'm really surprised. Like, we should bring that up because my name is not, I wasn't born Molly. That was something that I came up with.
Yes.
I was like, you know, in high school, I think I wanted a nickname. Like, I wasn't cool enough to get a nickname, I guess. I don't know. So, like, this is not something you give yourself. Like, this is something you should earn, or somebody else calls you this cute thing. Like, to like rename yourself. Like, I thought that I was going to get a lot of flack about it. Like, what the hell are you doing? What are you thinking? Like, but it was the most empowering thing that I ever could have done for my forward thinking, for my mindfulness, for my creativity, was to let go of the expectations that I am this thing. Like, it gave me a freedom that I never could have imagined. Like, I was just doing it because it felt like it was just coming out. Like, it was just meditating. Things were just coming up for me that I should do this thing. Like, I didn't realize the impact that making a choice that was so unconventional would have on my entire life. It's wild.
Did you ever check out the numerology, the difference in the numerology between your birth name and the name you gave yourself?
Yeah, I did it when I actually came up with like the spelling of it, and across the board, like, everything is the same except for like one aspect of it, and it's actually a little bit better. But all of the somehow the numerics of it work out to where I'm still a leader. I'm still number one, you know, like my life purpose, my heart's destiny, like all of these things still work out to be very similar to what they were with my birth name, which I didn't do that necessarily intentionally. It just happened to work out that way. I think it's beautiful. It's
like your soul knew that you needed that boost, I think. That was, so I dropped an L out of my name when I was in 8th grade, that summer between 8th and 9th grade. And when I did a numerology session with Monica Kenton, she like talked to me about how, like, basically that was like at a certain time when it meant blah, 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 blah in my life path or whatever. And it didn't change my numbers a lot, but it gave me that extra strength to like come into what I was supposed to be doing. And it was like so cool because, you know, I had the same thing, even though it was one letter, it wasn't a full name change. It wasn't that drastic, but my family was I mean, they only just barely stopped ragging on me. Like, I just changed it back 4 years ago. I just put the L back in my name because it was right before my mom died. And I was just sitting around thinking like, okay, so for some reason I've never legally changed it. And I could have changed it when I got married and took on my husband's last name. And I could have changed it a million times. I still felt like really self-conscious about dropping that one L, like almost like I was like this, kind of like a shameful person, like, you know, like turning my back on my own family and all this stuff. And there was like guilt around that.
All kinds of weird feelings come up. And I think like that, like right there, what you're saying is the thing that will help you get into the flow, is that if you start to do these little tiny things, you'll get these weird thoughts that come up and you're like, why am I attached to that? Who is it that's believing this thing? Like, what is that feeling? Where is that coming from? And then you'll start to give yourself more freedom to work and play and, experiment with that, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. They can just be tiny little out of the comfort zone things. You don't have to go and like sell your house and just move into a bus and tear it apart and, get on the road with your cats and your husband. I mean, people don't necessarily have to do that, but what they can learn, I think, from watching this is we can just like do some, like, okay, if you always eat meat every night, that was another weird thing is like, I grew up in a house where if you didn't have like a meat and potatoes dinner, it wasn't a dinner. Mom must have been sick or something was really, really wrong in that house. Like, and so for me to like have my own house now and my own children and my own family. And when I make a meatless dinner in the beginning, I was like, oh, somebody's going to catch me. Like, I'm going to be in trouble for doing this. But then I was like, but I don't want freaking meat every night for dinner. Like, I just don't. So why do I have to cook it just because that was all what was always done for me? Yeah. So like just something simple like that. You could just make spaghetti with no meat in it.
And that was kind of the allowance to try something different. Even if it's like, change your hair color, wear a different kind of shoe. Like it could just be really simple stuff and you'll have different thoughts that come up. Like you will. Yeah.
It's like stretching us into that, ability to not be in the box so much. Mm-hmm. When I changed my hair color for the first time and got color in my hair last year, it was like in August. We went up north where it's very conservative. I felt like everybody was staring at me and I couldn't believe how uncomfortable I was. And I always feel like I'm that spirit who does crazy shit. Like, I'm unconventional. I wear what I want to wear. I do my hair how I want to do it. I wear, whatever makeup I want to wear or don't want to wear makeup. I just show up how I am. But I noticed that there was still something inside of me that was worrying about what other people might be thinking. And I was so caught off guard with that and it made me feel super uncomfortable. But then it made me, after I let go of the discomfort, I was like, where does this come from? What is it related to? Like, how do I let go of it? What kind of work do I need to do? Or what do I need to open up to? And you see, like, I keep dyeing my hair crazy colors. So obviously I got over it. But it's just interesting because, like, we don't have to go, like, way off the cliff. We can just do, like, this little, like you did with, you went to the house. And
the discomfort. That's what it is that when you have that path of least resistance, we want to go to the thing that's comfortable because it's what we know. But if you go into it, like, I don't want to say I look forward to trouble because I don't look forward to it. So if the shit hits the fan, I'm like, okay, what is there to learn here? Like, what is this discomfort? Where is it coming from? Why can't I get beyond this? And then I play and manipulate with that, and like nothing is going to stop me. I will, move and figure it out. And then that's where, it starts to snowball from like a couple little things into bigger things, into bigger things and bigger things. And before you know it, you're living in a bus down by the river.
You're living in a bus down by the river?
Yeah. Brody always does that, It's a Saturday Night Live. But,
do you have a little bit of time to talk about the quantum memoir?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit too.
What do you want to know about the quantum memoir?
So, do you want to talk a little bit about like how it came even to be, and then maybe describe like some of the, like, the flower of life, like a little bit of the premises, like the actual, like real scientific or spiritual principles that it's actually really built on? Because it's not just some made up shit that there would be nothing wrong with that, but it really does have a basis that makes sense. It's quantum physics based, it's spiritual based, whatever. But you created
one of my followers, she's done an amazing job explaining what it is. She's used it a lot. Juliet, I'll have to give you the link to her. She's done an amazing job explaining it, because I've always sort of had, I think because I'm so close to it, a hard job explaining what it is for somebody else. Like, I don't really know, what it was for me. And it came quick. Like, as soon as I renamed myself, and I had like 5 different notebooks, and each notebook had a different metaphysical, like my past family issues. Like, I had a notebook for all these different things that I was studying. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could just like have some way to put these all together? And then I was learning about sacred geometry, and the shape that the quantum memoir makes is called the fruit of life. And this is in the flower of life. This is in Metatron's cube. So there's some metaphysical properties that if by drawing this and seeing this, there's something that subconsciously is happening to the mind, because somehow we are these quantum beings. I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Resonates with our subconscious, like with who we are, you know, like at our core, that we might not even be able to articulate into a language. And then so I just started with just like the circle, like just the round ones at first, and I came up with this whole like season, like, okay, winter, spring, summer, fall, you know, creating energy and exhausting energy. So the main part of it is that you have your purpose in the center, and then on the right hand side, you're cultivating and you're creating energy for around your purpose, whatever it is that you want to do. And then at the top is connect. This is sharing and connecting with other people, a very important part of it. And then on the right-hand side is where you're exhausting, you're expressing, you're refining, you're putting out the energy that you've cultivated, you're exhausting it so that you can then start over again. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle of creation. So cool. And the seed words, like, it was just something that, like, at the time that I was doing it, I didn't realize necessarily what intuition was, like, in a metaphysical sense, or, you know, speaking to your higher self, your oversoul, which we may share. I didn't raised all of those sorts of things. Like, I wasn't raised religious, but like to me, the metaphysics was just as unworldly as religion was. Like, it wasn't tangible enough. It wasn't science enough for me. So these words just kind of, like, I thought that I was coming up with them, you know, like, oh, I'm smart and I've studied these things and, you know, like, write them down. But in hindsight, I realize now that this was probably more of an intuitive thing, that when I was meditating, I was learning the things that I was doing at the time. They just came together on the paper. Like, I can't necessarily take credit for it. Anybody could have been meditating at that time and come up with something very similar. This is just happens to be my take on it. But it is a way, I suppose, to tap into your subconscious mind, like your ego and your spirit, and mix all of these things about you together in a way that you can visually see it, both like with little doodles or words or quotes, like even a study guide if you're studying, you know, certain things. And then you could sit back and look at it and see it from a broader perspective of how everything interrelates to one another.
So it's kind of like a journaling, or like a self-exploration, journaling, and it goes right along with the homeschooler, like self-teaching. So you're starting in that circle with that, like, thought or query or whatever. And then as you build the circles outside, you're going on like a path or like a journey, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Yeah. And then whatever comes, you don't
forward, you write down.
When you start that first circle, you never know what your end picture, your completed quantum memoir is going to look like.
Yeah.
And I always love watching you build them and then I like to look at them backwards too. Like, I like to look at the completed one and then see like where it was still blank, like where you just had that center one in before you started drawing all the things in. It's just so cool. Like, it's just like, it's a tapestry to me. It's like, it's so woven into, and it's pulling in the natural cycles that we see mirrored everywhere. Like, you know, you said the seasons, waxing and waning of the moon.
Like, in normal life, you don't even necessarily think or know about these things. Like, you don't see how they play out, you know, like women, like we have menstruation, like, so, oh, it's my period time. But you don't necessarily think about the season of it and the month and the moon cycle and all of this, this like creating energy and exhausting energy is part of the flow, because it gets the pump moving. It gets the mind, you know, and the heart together.
Exactly. Oh, I love it how you said, like, it gets the pump moving, but that's totally true. It's like, you can't make room for more to come in unless you let go.
Yeah.
Like, you have to like let it out. Because if all you ever do is like study books, take classes, download information from, you know, the nether regions or whatever, you know, and you're always like taking in stuff. If you don't put something out there through your creativity, teaching, through giving it away, whatever, that's what they used to say in AA. You know, you can't, what is it? You can only keep what you have by giving it away. So basically you can only keep your sobriety by, you know, sharing that with someone else. And it's like, that's a good saying, just like in general life. So like teachers, and Bodhi probably would totally say this. You probably see this in him. But you know, we can't, as a teacher, we can have all this knowledge, we can have all these ideas, but like, we're not going to keep getting more ideas. We're not going to keep getting like even more amazing at what we teach unless we're teaching. Yeah. We actually have to teach it. And then they always say like, you know, you learn more when you're teaching than just by being the student. Like, and yeah, to me, that's always been true. Like if I really want to dig down and really learn something, like it's part of me, I go teach it whether I feel like I'm ready to or not. I just make myself do it. And that's where I learn it. Like it's a skin. Like it's part of me. I
should have wore my my homeschooler t-shirt.
I was thinking the same thing.
Is learn through creating your own experience. So like you can learn all day long about something, but until you implement it, then you're not going to know what it means to you. You're going to know what it means from the person that you learned it from, or the, you know, like who taught it, who wrote it. But until you actually implement something, you don't know, like you could come up with something completely different and more fabulous from something that you learned from just trying it and doing it. And that's why I think, like, I never can decide which one of these spheres is my favorite, but observe and express probably are my favorite. And express is about doing that, implementing the thing that you've been trying to cultivate.
That's so cool. And I love that because it's like actually taking that theory, and when it's theory, it's almost kind of still, it's sort of empty in a way. There's like, it's almost like this blank template, but when you're actually expressing it, like that's your word, when you're putting it out there and doing it, putting it into action, that's where you get to make it your own.
Yeah.
I think.
And anyway, it's just like that. Else.
Yes, exactly.
That expression might not be the thing. It might be the thing that sparks somebody else to do something different with it. That is the pretty part.
But she's basically got, you know, on her YouTube channel, there's like tutorials on how to do it, how to set it up. Yep. I don't think I have my templates down here, but I tried to do it with like caps, how you suggested in or bottles or whatever, to make the circles. And you're actually an artist, so it's probably easier for you.
I look like kindergarten. Crazy. Come on.
So I went on YouTube and I actually bought like those little green templates for a couple bucks. And I love my templates. Like just drawing I think you even said this one time, just drawing it.
Yeah.
Can just put you in such a state of relaxation because you're working with sacred geometry, which is a part of the core of our beings. I mean, it's like part of who we are energetically. So we're putting that out on paper and it totally takes you into this like other state. And so I'm not going to lie and say that I've actually worked my way through it, because that's one of my things. I'm like, oh, I got to get to that. I got to get to that. But then I told myself, it's like, you know what? The day you actually complete one, it's the right time. You're not behind or anything like that. But I do love drawing the circles out, and I actually use the circles I'll draw them out and use them for my bullet journal for just like to do like different aspects, because just drawing those circles feels so good to me. But so it's just a whole process, and you can learn like how to put it together, and obviously there's space to make it your own, because that's what she's all about. So you don't have to do it. She even says like, you know, you can use different words if you want to. You can change it up. You can add more circles in. You can, you know, do whatever you want to with it. And all of that is free. You can look at it on YouTube. You can look it on the Quantum Memoir site. Isn't it just quantummemoir.com?
Yeah, quantummemoir.com. And I have a free download sheet. So I have one on there that's, you know, digitally, that's already drawn if you don't want to trace little caps and things like that. And you could just, you know, outline them with a colored pencil or marker or something like that. So you can still get the effect of drawing it without having to like make it all wonky and crooked.
That's what I did
for a while. I didn't like it. I had to come back to the paper book.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it had a completely different energy to it.
Oh, it did. And
who would have ever thought of that either? Like, I mean, did you think of that before you changed over? Did you know that was going to happen?
I didn't, because actually before I started doing the Quantum Memoir, like I drew on my iPad, like I did graphic design on the iPad. So when I started the memoir, I started it on paper. And I didn't necessarily like that because I was used to the other thing. But once, like obviously that was probably an intuitive thing that I needed to do it with paper. It's definitely, it feels more fruitful doing it with the paper than it does on a digital device. Maybe it's all the MFs or whatever they are coming at me. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just for me, even it was so much more satisfying to look at the ones. And it's not like I hated the ones that you were doing digitally. I just felt so much more connected, satisfied, grounded, even looking at your ones that you actually drew by hand. I just love your hand-drawn artwork too.
Thank you.
I love it. My daughter is a really amazing artist too. And like just anybody who can draw by hand. I mean, I'm impressed by people who can digitally draw too. Like that blows my mind when she gets out her tablet. I'm like, you did that on a freaking computer? She's like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's crazy. But I love the hand, like me and my bullet journal. I love to handwrite. This is my month. This is my goals. This is what I want to do. And that was one thing is like we had the discussion way in the beginning. You said you can totally implement that, into your, you can implement it to any journaling, any calendar type thing that you're already doing.
Yeah.
Your goals, your plans.
Any spiritual practice that you're already, like anything that you're learning, any kind of practice that you have, meditation, diet. Like literally, I can't imagine anything that this couldn't be used for.
Yeah.
If you had the desire to implement it.
I'm really excited for more people to see it. I think over the next 5 or 10 years, as you're figuring out where you want to go, I think we are going to see some really cool people come up with some really neat applications for it, things that you never even, necessarily thought of. And it's just going to expand it.
But to just let it, develop and evolve on its own. Like I'm not selling anything with it or anything like that. Like it's what I do to manifest, progress in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's so cool. And not that it would be wrong if you were selling it or teaching a course on it or, saying you can buy the templates for, or I made this thing to go along with it. It wouldn't be wrong to do that. Plenty of people do things like, they sell their creativity, including me. But it's neat that it is a measure of trust in the universe, and just, your exploration and seeing like, if I go down this path and I open myself to this reciprocity and I'm open to like what will happen, and I'm trusting and knowing, because I totally believe that. I believe that when we believe that we will be taken care of, we are taken care of in some amazing ways. And when we're told by our higher self or oversoul or whatever you want to call it, God, whatever, and you let go of something and you're like, I don't know. And you're like, all right, you get like the biggest rewards in its place. It's just crazy what will happen. I mean, but we just have that belief that, oh, I don't know, because this is really valuable. I don't know if I should let go of it. What if I need it?
It's the control. And that's kind of what I was saying about, like, I could have made this into a business. Like I had to fight against that because I was so conditioned to like control and create, like gotta have a successful something. And like this is a practice of trust for me, to let go of that and let whatever comes forward come forward, whether this is just a practice for me to do or if it's something that I'm going to be sharing with others. Time will tell.
And to trust that nobody's going to come in with their grubby little hands and fuck it up and use it in a way you didn't mean to, because that would be me. My thought, if I created, and basically it's almost like giving birth to something, like this is your child. Yeah. And to trust like all of humanity with your child, like, oh my God, heaven forbid, what if they give him the wrong food or dressed him in the wrong clothes or read him the wrong bedtime story or showed him an inappropriate movie, or like anything could happen. I mean, that is like a huge measure of, okay, I just trust that whatever good is supposed to come out of this. And if it's only for me, it's for me. And if everybody and their brother is going to be using this as a household item in, 5 years from now, it's going to be like this thing, but yet, I just got my energetic give back instead of an actual, here's your dollar amount for exchange for you creating this or whatever, like most of society lives.
Value doesn't attach to.
Right. That is such a huge,
whatever this is.
That's so freaking big. I mean, I don't even know if I'm there yet. I'm like, it kind of makes me feel a little bit like, and then those are the moments where that's the stuff when we have conversations like this, you and I, or me and somebody else, when I start to feel a little bit like, whoa, that's a little bit, ooh, that's where I start to get curious. Like, let me explore into that. And that's where I know that my personal growth is going to be found, because it's like, well, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Why does it make me feel uncomfortable? Do I really need to hang on to that? You know, what else is there out there for me? And I think that's what you're really teaching with us, is that, you know, when we have these, you know, these program thoughts that have come from, you know, being raised, and it's not like anybody was trying to brainwash us or anything. It's just, you know, society's expectations and conventions and the way that they keep us safe, and right and wrong and law and whatever. And so, you know, I think everything is changing. It's like the paradigm shift, and the fact that the stuff that used to be important, I think in the next, I don't know, 20, 50 years, I think it's just going to totally change, like a lot. Like
that. Hopefully. I see it sooner than that. Like, I see it
me too.
in the next 10 years. A huge change.
I think sometimes I give it more space than that, but I do feel like we've already seen like such a high speed change in technology. Like, it just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And we're keeping up with it. We're getting used to being able to change that fast.
Yeah.
But I think you're totally right. It's
the mind to change.
Yeah, exactly. And our minds are changing. For the ones of us that don't think it is, it still is. It's happening for all of us. But some of us are just still kind of being like, I don't know, because we're still clinging on to some stuff because it's our safety net. But it's okay.
It's not even safety. It's the comfortable. What you're familiar with.
Well, what we think it's safe. You're right. It's not safety at all. But we tell ourselves like, well, if I'm comfortable, then I'm probably safe too. If I get uncomfortable, there's unknown there. And well, in unknown, that could be like, who knows what might happen. I might not be okay over there. But the fact is like you said, we're always okay. Right. We just have to do something different.
With the fact that you will be able to meet any challenge that comes at you. Like that.
Yes.
You will be a lot more free.
Yeah.
You could just be comfortable and trust that you will handle whatever's there.
Yep. And then we can be more accepting of other people that do things differently when we're like that, because we don't see their way of doing things as like, oh my God, that makes me feel really weird. Or, you know, it could be dangerous, or it's bad, or it's wrong, or whatever. We'll just be like, oh, I wonder if I want to try that. And then you either do or you don't. But, you know, it's not going to be, so I could just see like where people will get along more. There's going to be less crime, less war, less nastiness, fighting, because all that stuff is going to start to melt away. People are just going to be like, oh, cool, let's just go with the flow. Right. Mm-hmm. I see that happening. I like to think positive like that, you know?
I do.
So, do you have anything else that you want to add? I think man, my mind is like all, like every time I talk to him, I was like, whoa, I got to like sit down and like kind of digest all that. Cause it's just like
a memoir, man. Yeah. Well, you know what, actually the only thing I would add is that I'll watch back over all of this, and I'll fill out what we've discussed, and I'll fill it into the memoir.
Yes.
So then that way you can share it too. So then people have a visual of what we discussed, and how it could be like laid out in the format of the memoir. But other than that,
right, just in this video,
nothing. Just I appreciate, you know, the time for you to do this.
Well, I think it's so cool because I don't know if I told you, but when you asked me about this, I had been thinking about you for about 2 weeks about asking you.
Yeah.
But I kept saying like, oh, she's probably busy with the bus. She's probably going to say no. She'll probably say like, I don't really think I fit in with your show. I don't know what, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I had all this, but I was like, well, I'm still going to ask her anyway. But I just hadn't gotten around to it. And then you said something to me and I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to stop doubting myself.
Working. Maybe
I know. We just like, I think a lot of times we're like vibrating, and then we like realize that the other person is, and whether we are on that like conscious wavelength, then we like say something and we're like, oh my God, I was thinking the same thing. Huh. Yeah. We're just like on that same.
I was like, I think I was doing an ask. I just asked, you know, like this was a thing that was coming for me. And I'm like, this is something that I need to do. And Michelle is the person.
Yay! Thank you for letting me be your
fearless.
person.
I was like, well, you know, what will happen? She'll say no? Okay, well, that's it. No.
And I didn't say no. I was like, heck yeah, let's do it next week.
Yeah, so thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure we can probably do this again, and we'll wear our shirts next time.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for being on, and I think it's going to be cool when we get the link up for the memoir once you have it done. And then this video will probably be on your website somewhere or on your YouTube channel as well.
So I'll mix it together with the memoir page, and I'll make it like artsy. And I'll put it on YouTube. I'll share it with you.
So this is the time I got to have a professionally mixed video, which is going to be super cool.
Thank you.
Well, you're professional. Thanks for being here so much. I really enjoy this. I'm sure that anybody who needs to see this is going to. I think we had quite a few people, but I don't think anybody really asked questions. I think they're going to have to see what the memoir looks like to really get it.
It'll all make sense once it's laid out, I think.
Absolutely. It does. You just have to, like, when you watch a couple of your videos, it's like, oh, I get what she's doing. Because I remember the first time I saw it, I was just attracted to the energy of what it looked like. I was like, what is that? That's really cool. But then as I watched your videos, it was like, oh my God, I kind of get that. And it just took me a little while because it's not what we're used to.
Exactly.
But it's rooted in nature. So it does make sense. Like, it makes sense inside you somewhere. It just resonates. And you just have to let go of like what you thought things were supposed to be. And then you get it. So thank you so much for being here. And we'll have to do it again.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.